Howdy folks, it's AJ the Hunting Gear Guy, and this is the Vortex Spitfire AR. It's a 1x prism red dot, prism scope. It's kind of like mind-boggling to think of a scope as just a fixed 1x thing, but it's a prism scope. And there's a couple of advantages to that. There's a couple of disadvantages to going with a prism scope, but super duper interesting optic. One of the things you'll notice with this thing is how clear and how close to the edge that optic goes. So you can, it's kind of hard for me because it's like backwards, but you can see that it gets very close to the edge. There's very little occluding this, so you get a very clean view of your target and things around it. And that's one of the big advantages. The other is you can see my reticle's not on. So Vortex calls these a red dot. They're kind of a red dot. They're kind of also not a red dot because that it's just an etched reticle, just like a scope. You don't have to have the reticle on. There you can see you can illuminate it, either red or green. And you can choose to either leave that on or not, or you can just change the brightness on it as well. So a bunch of different settings on this scope. It's a scope, right? Yeah, it's a scope. Why don't we get on the table and take a closer look at this thing? Now, one thing to notice, and just to talk a little bit about the Spitfire line, this is the Spitfire AR. There's also another Spitfire 1X. I think there's a Spitfire 3X, and then they also have some new generation ones. Their new HD Gen 2, they have a 3X and a 5X. Those are quite a bit more expensive, and they're newer than these guys. These prism scopes are a little bit more expensive than some of the other red dots out there. But they're also cheaper than some red dots as well if you're to compare it to like Aimpoint and that kind of thing. So they're right in the middle of the price range. Expect like right around $300-400 kind of a thing. The AR, the Spitfire AR version, the thing that makes it cool, rather than just doing nothing with this space down here, which is, you need this anyways because for an AR you need to mount it a little bit higher up. They have opted to put a battery in there. So they've actually opted to put a AAA battery in here. So nice and common battery. A lot of these red dots and illuminated reticles use like the dial, and they put a 2032 like watch battery in there. Kind of a pain in the butt to get to, and not that common. Whereas AAA's super easy to get to and super common. You can see that we can access that using a flathead screwdriver from the front. So that's a really welcome change with this. The other welcome change is that they've opted for buttons towards the back here. So rather than again a rotating dial that might kill your batteries, we've got buttons here and a little bit of circuitry so that it can automatically turn off. And that is very welcome because anytime you have an illuminated reticle, I have a couple of scopes where if you turn it and you accidentally leave that thing on, give it a week and your batteries are dead. So I really like automatic off, and I won't get anything that doesn't have an automatic off of some kind. So as this is the Spitfire AR, there's a couple differences. Again, we talked about the riser a little bit. This one uses 2 keys, a little bit bigger of a clamp on the side there to grab onto the Picatinny rail. That's going to be on your AR or similar style rifle. We have these flip caps that you can choose to flip to the side, flip to the top, flip down, whatever you want. One thing that is a little bit different is that this has a diopter adjustment on the rear here. So that diopter adjustment is because this is a scope. It's a scope. It's a 1x scope. But if you need to, you can actually adjust the diopter setting there to what is comfortable and clear for your eyes. Now, if we look through this optic again, and I try to adjust the focus, come on. Now you can see when we're looking through the optic there, we've got that nice 2 ring, and then there's actually a dot in the middle. It's kind of hard for the camera to pick up, but there is a dot in the middle of there. And you can very easily, just with the click of 2 of these buttons here, change it from green to red, or turn it all the way down and just go with the black. So all of those are options, and the nice thing there is that if the battery doesn't work, and let's say you're at a competition or something like that, the black reticle will be just fine. That's what all the other scopes have anyways, so it's going to be fine on this prism sight. Now, one of the cool things for a 3-gunner will be what's underneath this top turret here. In 3-gun, there's a division called limited. Sometimes it's got different names for it. It might be called factory or something like that. And in that division, you're only allowed a 1x or iron sight optic on your rifle. Most red dots don't have a turret like this one. This is a BDC that's made for 5.56. I believe this one's graduated for 60 grain rounds, but you'll have to check what your rifle is capable of and if it's going to match there. But you can see there that it is set up for different distances with 5.56. So if you needed to make a 400-yard shot, you would just leave that cap off, do your close-in stuff, need to go out to 400, crank it over to 400, make your shots, crank it back down to 1, and then keep going. That's something that's a trick you can't really do with most red dots. Most red dots don't have super friendly turrets like this. Now, if you're not shooting a 5.56, or if you just would rather have the MOA click adjustments, they actually give you another turret that you can use instead. So this one's just graduated in MOA, and you can see there that it's going to be a very quick turn on that guy as well. And all we'd have to do is pull that top screw off, pull the cap off, and then put that guy in. Similarly, when we zero it at the range, we can use that Allen key, hold it tight, unscrew that key, and then set it to 0, 1, or if we're using the MOA, 0 or whatever. So that's a real nifty trick. That's something that, again, you can't do with most red dots. And we also have the same thing going for our side turret. So our side turret is just MOA click adjustable, but that's probably all you're going to need anyways at the range. If you're worried about like mixing and matching a BDC and MOA, I just recommend using the MOA turret on the top. Now, you heard me say that field of view is really good with these things. It's a little bit hard to pick up on this camera, but what I'm going to do is take pictures of that and compare it to this Aimpoint Pro and just show you. You can already see it from this. Like if you look at the thickness of black and how much you can't see, it's going to be quite different on those ones versus a prism scope like this. And it's going to be particularly bad on a little red dot like this older Spark. So quite a bit of difference between these and a Prism 1X like this. Again, I'll take some photos with the camera to roll in here and show you. Now, I mean, the other thing you might be concerned about is the size and weight of a red dot, or not red dot like this. Me, not so much, because I already have one of these Aimpoint Pros. I've actually got a much smaller mount on it. This is the chunky unit that it's supposed to be on right there. And with this mount on it, it's 367 grams, which is quite a bit heavier than this guy right here, because this guy comes in at 317. So this plain red dot is quite a bit heavier than this guy. And as you can see, the bulk is comparable. I would say that the bulk is almost the same between these two optic solutions. So again, a lot of the heavier duty stuff is going to be bigger and bulkier, and I would say that it's very similar to the size and bulk that you would get with a Spitfire AR. So let's stop talking about this and let's take it out to the range.
What's that? That's a Winchester Defender. Alright, so we've got full hub sights. So you're working like a shotgun. This one, do you want to be?
Now, I mentioned 3-gun, and the fact that it's got turrets is one of the reasons why you might want to look at one of these specifically for that kind of competition shooting. It is easy on the eyes. One of the major reasons that people choose a prism scope over a red dot is astigmatism. If you have astigmatism, or if your eyes are just old and you're starting to get old in your years, a red dot might not look round. It might look crackly or slanty, or I don't know, however which way your eyes are all goobed up. Whereas a prism sight will look fine. A prism sight will look great, even if you have googly old eyes. So a lot of people who have astigmatism or corrective lenses and they can't correct for the astigmatism, they opt for a prism scope. And if you want a 1x prism scope, right here, that's your ticket right there. Especially again if you're in a competition or you just don't want them extra magnification. Like at 3-gun, we shoot out to 300 plus yards, and I'm typically using a red dot, and it's okay. It's not as accurate as a proper scope, but it's okay. And I think that a lot of people end up using more magnification than they really need to, and that sometimes like a compact 1x magnification optic is okay. If I was hunting, I would probably want something a little bit more, maybe like a 3 or a 5. But then again, like that's the style of hunting I do. Sometimes I shoot coyotes at 300 yards. If I just had 50-yard shots and in, maybe a 1x would be just fine. Maybe this would be okay for a hunting optic. It's certainly nice and simple. I wouldn't have to worry about the cold affecting the battery, because if the battery is dead, I don't care. It's still a prism scope. It's still going to run just fine. Because it's a single unit, it's nice and easy to pop that on a rifle and not have to worry about height over or anything like that, because it's made for the AR height with this riser on it. So yeah, you might use one of these hunting if you were close in and you didn't want to use your iron sights. Or again, if your eyes are old, this is going to be easier on the eyes than trying to use an iron sight or a red dot. So pretty interesting optic. Take a look at the Vortex Spitfire. Thanks for watching.